All right, so yesterday we started talking about the patterns of sine and cosine, and we are looking at the graph of g of x equals 1/2, the sine of 1/2 x. We found the amplitude, and then we found the period. We're going to talk about what is happening to the graph of the parent function. So let's look at that graph of the parent function real quick. We wrote it here. Okay, so for the sine, you start at 0, you end at 0. Okay, in the middle is 0, and then halfway between the first two x-intercepts, you reach your max. Halfway between those two, you're going to reach your minimum. Whenever you have the amplitude, we wrote down yesterday, it affects the max and the minimum of your graph. So your A value affects the output, which is your y coordinate. Okay, so that's going to affect the max and the minimums. Remember we talked about the max and the min are the y coordinates. Okay, and our A value is 1/2. So in order to find what the maximum and minimum are, we can take that value from the parent function and we can just multiply it by our A value. Okay, so our maximum is 1/2 times 1. And the reason why we're multiplying it by 1 is this is the max of the parent function. Okay, so you multiply A times the maximum of the parent function to get your new maximum. You do the same thing with the minimum. So what is the minimum value for the sine function? -1. So if your A value is -1/2, what it does is it changes your minimum to -1/2. All right, and then the B value, okay, that affects the period. Okay, if B is, in this case, it's 1/2. That means there's a horizontal stretch by 2. So it's the reciprocal of your B value. Okay, so if you have a B value of 1/2, if you flip it over, it's 2. And then if that value is greater than 1, it's a horizontal stretch. So when we say it's a horizontal stretch, all that means is horizontally, we are pulling that graph apart so it gets wider. Okay, and then this is going to affect the period. Because the stretch is by 2, when you are finding the period value, you could just take that and you can multiply it by the period of the parent function. Do you guys remember what the period is of the parent function? No? Closer? 2 pi. So the parent function's period is 2 pi, so 2 times 2 pi is 4 pi, which is what we calculated. Okay, I just want to show you where that comes from. So you're doing 2 pi divided by b. And remember, when you're dividing by b, it's the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. That's exactly what's happening there. All right, so we are using patterns in order to graph. Okay, so we're not going to be using our calculators. I am going to show you some things in Desmos today. And you can graph this in your calculator to check, or if you want to see what your shape looks like. So, bless you, this is called g of x, so I'm going to write x and g of x. Okay, so we're going to be talking a lot about patterns. So we want to start at 0. We want to end at the period. Okay, so start at 0. We're going to end at whatever our period is. Okay, so we're going to start at 0. We said our period was 4 pi. Okay, so we're going to write 4 pi there. Now halfway in between those is what value? What's halfway between 0 and 4 pi? 2 pi. What's between 0 and 2 pi? 1 pi. And between 2 pi and 4 pi? 3 pi. Okay? So we're always going to fill out the x values first. Now to fill out the y values, we are going to be using our parent function. So remember, for the sign at 0, where are we? 0, you're at 0. So the great thing is you always start and end at the same place. So if you start at 0, you're going to end at 0. For the sine function, halfway, you're still at 0. You're still at that x-intercept. And then halfway between these two, hopefully you guys wrote that down. Halfway between, you reach your max. Halfway between those, you reach your min. Okay, so what was our max value that we calculated in step 2? What's our max? What's our new max value now? 1/2. And our min value? -1/2. Okay, so instead of being 1 and -1, it's 1/2 and -1/2. Okay, when you are doing your graph, this is a trig graph. Okay, and I'm going to give you a paper with these to do your practice on. And then we're going to label below so that we can see the graph. So if we want to go out to 4 pi, okay, we can span that out there. We can make this 2 pi. This would be pi. This would be 3 pi. Okay, and you don't have to label every single one on the other side, but you are welcome to. Okay, so when we graph, we are going to start at 0, 0. So we're going to start at 0, 0 here. Okay, now, like we told you yesterday, wherever we start, we're going to end at the same place. So if I'm ending at 4 pi, we're going to be here. And then halfway is another x-intercept. I do want you to trace this in pencil first because this is the first time we're doing this. And it's going to take us a little bit to get the waves right. So I don't want you to stress out about that. And then because we are going by up to 1/2, it would be really difficult to do half of this. So let's just go by halves, okay? Or even if you wanted to go by like a fourth, that would be fine too. Okay, so we're going to scale by half. So if this is a half, this would be 1. This is -1/2. This is -1. And it's fine if you just write your scale above instead of labeling it there. That's fine too. Okay, so at pi, I'm going to my max. In between, I'm going to my min. And then I'm going to curve these through here. And now we're going to use the pattern to fill out the rest of this. You just want to try that on your own, or you want me to help you with it the first time? Okay. All right, so if I look over here, I can see if I went 2 units, I went up. So on this side, 2 units, I'm going to go down to 1/2. And then 2 units, I'm back at 0. 2 units, I'm going to be up at the max. 2 units, I'll be back at 0. Okay, so you're going to continue your wave. And we're going to connect those with a curve. Okay, so it's going to follow that same pattern. And again, I like to do that first in pencil, just because as you're learning how to do the waves, sometimes you can be a little shaky there. Okay, and then if you want to outline it when you're done so it looks clear, that is perfectly fine. And then once you have that graph, I want you to look at part B. And in part B, I want you to do the amplitude and the period.
and then I'll help you with step 2, but I really need you to do step 1 for me, okay? Okay, so on part B, what do we get as our A value? What do you get for A? 1/3. Okay, so that's going to be your amplitude, and that's going to affect the maximum minimum. Okay, so here's your A value, here's your B value. So when you calculated the period, if your B value is 2, the period is just going to be what? Pi. Okay, so once you know what the period is going to be, if you want to come down here, this is your x and then your h of x. Remember, we are always starting where? 0. So we're going to start at 0. We're going to end at the period. Okay, so if this is pi, see if you guys can find the halfway and then the half of the half. Okay, find the halfway and then find half of the half. Okay, and this is what's happening to the graph of the sine of x, and that was a whoopsie on my part. It should say the cosine because we're doing cosine now. Okay, so what's halfway between 0 and pi? Great. Yep, pi over 2. What's halfway between 0 and pi over 2? Pi over 4. Very good. Okay, now for this one, were you guys able to find that? It's 3 pi over 4 because we're just counting by pi over 4s, okay? So this is 1 pi over 4. This would be 2 pi over 4, and 2/4 is 1/2. Yep, and then this would be 3 pi over 4, or 3/4, right? And then this would be 1. You feeling okay about that? Yeah. All right, so then this is cosine. So I'm just going to draw like just the rough sketch of your cosine. Remember we talked about this? The little longhorn or ram, where you start at your max, you end at your max, halfway is your min, and then halfway between those are your intercepts. Okay, so at 0, we reach the maximum. So let's talk about what our max is going to be. Okay, so the A value is telling you that there's a vertical compression by 1/3. So that means that vertically, the graph is being smushed together. Okay, and then that affects the maximum by multiplying 1/3 times 1. So we have 1/3, and then your minimum is 1/3 times -1. So that is going to be -1/3. Okay, can you guys put those values on your chart? Where on the cosine does it reach the max values? Where does it reach the min? should have your max at the start and your max at the end. Your halfway is the min, and then you have 0 and 0. Okay, so remember, you have your max at the start and the end, you have your min halfway, and then halfway between those, you're reaching your intercepts. Okay, what this B value does is you have 2, and if you flip it, there's a horizontal compression by 1/2. Okay, because you do the reciprocal. So the compression means that you are smushing the graph together this way, and you are smushing the graph together up and down. Okay, so you are going to have a wider graph, and it is going to have more cycles from 0 to 2 pi. Okay, so we're going to adjust our axis so that we can go by our values in our table. Thank you. Okay, so this is going to be pi. This is going to be pi over 2. This is our pi over 4. This is our 3 pi over 4. Okay, did some of you already graph it on a different grid or no? Alright, so then this would be negative pi. Okay, and then we have negative pi over 2. So if it's 1/3, we can just scale this by 1/3. Okay, so we're going to start at 0, 1/3. Okay, we're going to end at pi 1/3. And then halfway between those, we are going to be at negative 1/3. Okay, and then halfway between those, we are going to be at our intercept. Okay, and then we're going to curve this through. It is being scrunched, so remember that this does not go up, it's going to go down here. And then we're going to finish the pattern. So after this maximum, notice it goes down to an intercept. Okay, so when I do my pattern, I count 1, 2, intercept, 1, 2, minimum, 1, 2, intercept, 1, 2, maximum. Okay, and then we are weaving this curve between those. And practice on connecting those with a curve there. And you have your arrows. I'm also going to show you what the difference is on Desmos. So I'm going to graph the parent function and this one on the same scale so you guys can see what's happening. Okay, so in red here, you have our sign. And then in blue, you, oh, that was the other one, my bad. Okay, Desmos.com. That one was cosine, sorry. Okay, so we have y equals the cosine of x, and then y equals 1/3 cosine of 2x. Okay, so now you can see what the comparison is of the two. So the red is the original. Okay, so the amplitude is lower. All right, so it was being smushed down. And then do you notice that there are more waves in the blue than there are in the red? Okay, there are more cycles in that same amount of space. Okay, so we're using these patterns, and you guys can, bless you, and you guys can scale this whatever you would like. Okay, and then I'm just going to help you come up with some scales that are going to be simple for you to graph, okay? So our f of x is equal to -2 times the sine of x. So our first step is always to find the amplitude and the period. Now, earlier in our note packet, we talked about the amplitude, and it's that absolute value, which is telling you the amplitude is always positive. So I know you see a -2 here, okay, but the amplitude is just the 2. Okay, so remember that your amplitude is always positive. Okay, A is always going to be positive. The negative represents a reflection, which we'll talk about in step 2. Okay, now your B value, there's nothing in front of x. What does that mean your B value is? 1. Great. So 2 pi divided by 1 is just 2 pi. So anytime it's a 1 in front of the x, your period is going to be 2 pi. Okay, so for step 2, we can just find your max and your min. Okay, your maximum value is going to match this amplitude here, so it's going to be 2. Your minimum value is going to be -2. And then we have to talk about the reflection. Okay. Anytime there's a negative in front, there's going to be a reflection. And what a reflection does is it flips the max and min order. Okay, so if there's a negative in front, that means there's a reflection. A reflection is going to flip the order of your maximum and minimum values. So when you're doing your table, when we're talking about the sign, well, when we're talking about both of them, you start at 0, you end at the period. So you're going to end this one at, where's my ending value going to be for x? 2 pi. Good. What's halfway? Pi. What's half of that? Pi over 2. You guys remember what this one is? 3 pi over 2. Great. Alright, so I want you to think about the sign value at 0 is what? What's the sign value at 0? Yes, the sign value at 0 is 0. Great. So, but if we start at 0, I know that my last point is 0 as well. Okay, so we start with 0, we end with 0. Okay, the middle is also going to be 0. Now, what the reflection does is it switches the max and the min. So this used to be where the maximum was. It is now going to be the min because it flips. This is going to be the max now because of that flip. So instead of going up to 2 first, we're going to go to -2. And then here we're going to reach that maximum, which is 2. So that happens whenever you have a negative value. Okay? Okay, so based on that, do you guys think that you can do the scale and do your graph? Okay, sometimes what I do
with all of these, we've had fractions. So I'm going to scale my y by half, which means that this is 1/2, this is 1, this is 1.5, this is 2. And the reason why I decided to do that for this is because we were working with halves. But then I want you to practice labeling this below, okay? We'll just draw straight line and shot it. All right, so once you graph this, you have 0, 0, and I want you to graph the whole thing. How is that going with the pattern? So I did -2 here, and then I'm doing +2 here. So if you're having trouble with the curve, because I know that takes some getting used to, what I recommend doing is see these 3 points here. We can loop that together, and then we can loop this part together. It's like a soft V shape. It's not quite a U. It is narrower than a U. Okay, and then once we have an intercept, we're going to count 2, and then you decide if you go up or down. If you notice you already have a max here, you aren't going to have the 2 maxes in it, or the 2 mins in a row. So then we got to go up to the maximum, 2 to the intercept, 2 to the minimum, 2 to the intercept, and then we're going to, again, with the curves, see how I can connect these 3 together, and then I'm going to connect these 3 together, and that's going to help you just get a nice little curve in there. And then sometimes I just go over it in a marker so that it shows up a little better. Okay, just make sure that you do have your curves, no straight edges. Okay, and then the rest of the time today we are going to work on our practice sheet, and sometimes this number 1 gets hidden, so as soon as you get it, I want you to do the vocab question. Okay, so it says they repeat in regular intervals called, and then go ahead and do that. Okay, and then whenever you have to graph them, you are going to fill out a table. So for those, I made these for you, my gift to you, so that you can have, like the tables are already made. The tables have 6 spaces in them because I made the first space for you guys to say that this was your X and your Y. Oh, we have one more for that. Okay, so as soon as you get this, I want you to do number 1, and then, yeah, on those tables, I just did the X and the Y. So do number one right now. And then this is due tomorrow in Google Classroom.